Hi, this is Chris Kennedy with Mastering Color Grading in After Effects, and in this lesson we're going to look at using curves to control color. We've already looked at the curves before, but we were just working with the basic idea of dragging down shadows and lifting highlights to create that S curve. But now we can look at using the red, green and blue directly. The same principle applies. If I click down in the low area of the red, I'm going to affect the red shadows. So if I pull them down this way, you can see the red shadows are lessened. There's less red in the shadows. If I push that up, the red shadows increase. You can isolate areas by clicking around them. So we could just move this area here and change the color of the shadows there. But as you can see, that quickly creates problems. Things start to look pixelated and messy. Just right click and reset that. One of the reasons that we use curves is that the curve makes the color flow smooth. So if I click in the middle here and lift that red in the midtones gradually, that's how it works, nice and smoothly all across the highlights and shadows. So it's best not to add too many different shapes like this, or it just starts getting very compressed and crushed. So let's just imagine that I'm going to boost the red shadows a little like that. Then if I go over to the green, I might want to see a bit more of that green in the foliage. So I'll just push that up a little, maybe drop the green shadows to bring out that red some more. And then in the blue curve, I could just pull down the blue just above the midtones to give everything a slightly yellower look. So you can see it's the same principle we've been using before. You're balancing red, green and blue and the master as well. It's fairly simple. It's quite basic. It's rare that you really want to do this sort of thing. That sort of look that we've got there is the best thing to use curves for. If you want to add a bit of color to the shadows, it tends to be quite good for that. A little more interesting is if you use the hue, saturation and lightness curves. So let's just go into that over here. And you can see instead of having a diagonal line, there's a horizontal line across each of these boxes. So wherever I click is going to be affected. And although this looks really complicated at first glance, all you need to look at is what color is intersecting with this line. So if I want to change the greens in my image, I look for the green here. I click on it and I change the hue of those greens by dragging that down. You can see they've gone sort of purpley there. If I move that to the right a little, they're a bit redder because I'm actually in the red area here. One reason that the whole image has gone sort of purple, if you look, this line now passes all the way through this purple blue area. So I maybe want to click here and isolate that green area. The problem with this again is that the whole reason we use curves is to create these smooth roll-offs. So I actually have to make this quite wide to capture all the green. And there it is. You can see now that I've widened that and we've got this dip covering all the greens and into the reds, that in the image all the green plants, the foliage, the grass has now gone red. That's quite an extreme look. I probably wouldn't want that large a hue change. Having done that, what if I want to make those reds and oranges a little more saturated? Well, I go over here and I just find where the red and orange intersects with that horizontal line, click and drag the saturation up. Alternatively, and more common, is to drag that down so you can remove a particular color. Again, click in some extra points to isolate that color. You can see we leave the blue sky, but we've reduced the saturation. There are many combinations that you can use to create different effects. For instance, I could go over to the blue saturation here and just lift that up so that the sky gets very blue, even though everything else has been desaturated. I'm just going to reset that curve, show you how we could do that more directly. Lift the blue sky and drop the greens and the reds. It's quite an interesting effect. And then I can push the saturation of the reds and the oranges up like that. So that's a completely different way of approaching things. The lightness will affect how bright or dark a particular color is. I'll just show you what happens if we try to darken the sky here. Although the sky itself looks great, you'll probably notice there's some pixelization in the clouds here. So you use this with great caution. So let's say I just wanted to darken the green areas. You can see how I've done that with the lightness there. The effect of these tools can be quite extreme, but you can also be fairly subtle. Just a small reduction in the reds there, and then I could maybe not change any hue at all in this, and then I could just lighten the red areas like that. It's a very different image to what we started out with. Just going to reset all. You can of course use the RGB curves and then the HSL curves. I'll just show you an example of that. Push the red shadows up. Just going to yellow everything like we did before. Then go into the HSL, and I'll say that we want to drop this yellowy red saturation. Not that far, maybe about that far. And we want to push the blue up. Then let's just shift the sky color a little. It's heading more towards blue than cyan now. And then in the lightness, I'm just going to drop the lightness of the sky to make that dark. And if you look at our source image, it's a fairly ordinary image of this power station, and there's our result. Quite surreal and extreme. You can of course go back to your RGB after this and make sure you're not clipping out. We're clipping out all over the place there. So I'll just pull the pedestal down and pull the gamma down. And of course, once that's all done, you can go back to your curves and make other changes if you so desire, making the sky a bit more purple there. It's a good idea to test this tool on a variety of different clips with lots of different colours in them here. The two main colours really are the green of the trees and the blue of the sky. So make sure you test on lots of different clips and get used to using these so you feel comfortable working with them. In the next lesson, we're going to look at using the component video tool to work with lightness.